Well, welcome to the Minnesota Turkey Growers Association Summer Conference. This is, I don't know if this is our 80th or not. I don't know when they started the summer conferences, but they've had a lot of summer conferences over the year. But it is nice to be able to celebrate our 80th anniversary of the Turkey Growers Association, and with that, all of the history and the accomplishments that our predecessors have had leading up to this point. And that kind of leads to the discussion that I'm going to start off with my presentation. I'm going to talk about the Poultry Teaching and Research Program Strategic Plan. And this is something that our Research and Food Safety Committee has been working on for the last couple of years, along with others from outside of the organization. But ultimately, again, I mentioned the history. One of the purposes of this plan is to create that roadmap, looking down the road, and trying to position the turkey industry in Minnesota and our partners to meet the needs of the growers. Again, as we look down the road, 20 years or so, and ultimately, the goal is to strengthen the poultry farmers' viability, both from a economic, environmental, and societal, so that we've still got the permission to be able to raise birds in this state, but also make sure that we're environmentally sound and economically viable. And then the other purpose of this plan is to support the poultry teaching, research, and extension programs, and develop an operationally sustainable research and teaching infrastructure. I think, again, one of the things that I think has been the strength of Minnesota's turkey industry is that we've had a strong infrastructure with the University of Minnesota and the Minnesota Board of Animal Health. And this plan is an effort to take a look internally and say, all right, what do we need, again, to help meet the needs 25 years down the road? And then ultimately become recognized internationally as the premier turkey research and education region. So we've kind of looked at this from four areas. We've got workforce development, which includes teaching and training, faculty, facilities, specifically for research, and then funding. The workforce development goal is to, again, look at developing the pipeline of students coming into the industry that can work in the industry, both on the farm as well as the allied industry, but also in academia and government. And so we're looking at creating a branded program. We're calling it a MAPS program, and Tim Johnson from the University of Minnesota will get into that in a little bit deeper. But we've already made some strides in that. Tim and I and some others met with the Dean of the College of Food, Ag, and Natural Resource Sciences and the Dean of the College of Veterinary Medicine on Friday of last week, and Dean for Extension was not available. But we had a meeting with them where we talked about this program. Again, Tim will go through the details of that. They were on board, and then the next step is to set up a meeting with the administrators for Ridgewater, because we're looking at starting a 2-year program or a certificate program at Ridgewater to train students to go directly in. And that meeting has been set up for July 26th. Again, I mentioned that we're looking at developing a pipeline at the bachelor's level, the master's, the PhD level, as well as the associate's level. Again, whether it's a formal associate's degree or it's a certificate that gives people the technical training to be able to work directly with birds. Another goal is to establish the Pomeroy Legacy Scholars Program, and we've set a $3 million target there in order to create enough money to support a couple of graduate students. And again, this has been something that we've had on the docket for the last couple of years. Hasn't gotten a lot of traction, but I think with the overall program here, it has a little bit more potential down the road. But again, part of this, it fits together, because if we want to develop this pipeline of students coming through with a master's and PhD, having a funding source for them is critical to helping get that established. Another goal is to host the Midwest Poultry Consortium's Center of Excellence, and actually the University of Minnesota will start hosting that in 2021. It has been at University of Wisconsin in Madison for the last 25 years or so, and Iowa State University and University of Minnesota will have entered into an alternating year program, so that will be hosted in Minnesota every other year starting in 2021. And then again, I mentioned the establishing an associate's degree or a certificate program through Ridgewater. Some of the things that we're currently doing in this, again, Pomeroy Legacy has been something we've been talking about for a while. We've had Renelia Scholarship for several decades. The MPF, we started a student career program last year, and it grew again this year. Next year, we're involving the Post-Agricultural Secondary Students Organization, which is a national organization based in Minnesota, but it's a national organization, and their national convention will be held in conjunction or at the same time as MPF during in the Twin Cities. And on that Thursday of our student career program, we'll have 600 students from those 2-year programs across the country that'll be part of that. So again, we've got to establish that pipeline of people coming into the industry. Poultry Health Management School is another educational opportunity for growers or farm workers. The consortium I mentioned, and then we continue to do outreach to FFA, 4-H, and again the PAS. So another area is the faculty. Again, we want to create a sustainable team of faculty, research, teaching, and extension, to be able to support the needs of the industry. And some of this will kind of fluctuate as we get further into some of these discussions. But what we're looking at right now is we want to be able to attract, again, I've pulled $1 million out of the air for poultry-related research, but we want to have sustainable funding coming through here to support the research. And then we'll continue advocacy for AGREET. AGREET is something that the farm organizations went to the state legislature back in 2015 to get some dollars in the baseline to hire faculty that are focused on productivity in agriculture. So it's not necessarily increasing yields, but it's increasing productivity. And we have 3 of those, three of the hires through that are here today. And in the next session, they will be introducing themselves and talking a little bit about their program. Again, the effort there is to get them connected with, let you know what kind of research they're looking at doing, but also to get them connected with you so that they've got resources or collaborators out there. Again, a poultry science endowed faculty position, so we don't have to go through the ebb and flow of budgets, and as people come and go, that we get something where we can have more of a steady person in a position, and then replace Dr. Sally Knoll before she retires. She's telling me she's going to retire at some point in the future, and I'm believing her. So we're trying to look down the road, and I don't know that it's that far down the road, but ultimately, again, what happens in university systems is that people, when they retire, the position sits open for a while until the university can kind of collect enough money to give a startup program and things. But the problem is, and especially in this situation, is that Sally has a program that's up and running. It's got a track record. It's got momentum. If we have an interruption there, we're going to lose some things. And so we're having conversations with the university about what can we do to get that, make sure there's a seamless transition there. And then a poultry instructor to recruit and teach poultry science. And then again, I've mentioned the 2-year associates program. From a facility standpoint, again, there's 2 primary facilities that research in poultry or turkey happens. There is the poultry teaching or research facility that's on the St. Paul campus. And that is something that has the process to get that remodeled has begun. They went through a pre-design and they're moving into that next stage, whatever that is. And that, I guess, I think the anticipated timeline on that is to have that up and running by 2021. And before I forget, I want to introduce Dr. Mike Schutz. Mike is the Animal Science Department head. He started not even 13 months ago. It was a year ago this month that he started, came back to Minnesota to be in that role. And he's been an important person in the conversations that we've been having with the University of Minnesota. And then the second facility is a large-scale facility. Of course, that is the one that's at Rosemont right now at Umore Park. And again, there's a couple of different reasons why that needs to move, and so we're having discussions about what's needed there, but also where and how that comes about. And then again, the part of the plan process was identifying research priority areas. Excuse me. So the areas that we've identified, again, these are general categories, and there's specifics below this, but disease control, food safety, pathogen control, nutrient utilization, reproductive research, and animal welfare. And then funding. Excuse me. Of course, funding is an important, part of this equation too. And again, the goal would be to attract dollars in here, having that research team that would be able to attract dollars in, but then also working with Congress to have them bolster the investment that the public is putting into public research, like land-grant universities. And so NEFA is one of the USDA programs that land grants tap into for funds. So that kind of wraps up. It's a quick overview of what we've got planned. For those that are at the banquet tomorrow, we will have the actual plan document available for you to take with you. And again, we're looking at this as a roadmap to help provide future direction for the overall research program within the turkey industry in Minnesota. And one of the faculty positions I forgot to mention that's tied to AGREET is that there's an avian physiology position. We had 2 candidates in last week that interviewed for that position, and And so that's encouraging too. And again, that's funded through that GREEP program. And that's, again, it's a physiology type position. Any questions on any, just rapid fire here? All right. With that, do we have, Tim is up next? All right, so I invite Tim Johnson, Dr. Tim Johnson. Tim is a professor and researcher in the College of Veterinary Medicine. And again, Tim is going to talk to us about the MAPS program. And I credit Tim because he's done a lot of work on creating the curriculum descriptions as well as helping to put together the pathway to, to get this through the university system. So, Tim?
So I think Steve really set up what I'd like to talk about nicely because he laid the foundation for all the stuff that I tend to not want to think about, which is how do we fund this, how do we make it work, and rather we've been thinking about it from more of the programmatic perspective. So this slide right here really sums up about probably 3 years of interactive discussions. So at the university, about 2 to 3 years ago, we started this poultry supergroup. And the idea behind that was that we have quite a few poultry researchers in both the College of Veterinary Medicine and also CFANs. And we collaborate, but we didn't connect enough. And the other piece of that discussion, as we started coming together more and just talking about research, talking about papers, trying to get better perspectives of what's going on in the industry. Part of what came up was that there was a question of, well, why don't we have a poultry branded program for training and education at the university? There's bits and pieces here and there, but if you look back historically, we've got 75 years or more of research history at that university, and there's never been a formal poultry program. So that's what really prompted the beginning of the discussions, and I had no idea what I was getting into at that point because it's really kind of all the working parts that have to come together to make this happen are pretty complicated. But in a nutshell, this really summarizes where we've gone. So what this involved was first just talking as a faculty, so really as a grassroots ground up type thing, and saying what do we want to do and what do we think that we can do, and then going out into the industry, and we've not only looked at turkey, but we're also thinking about chickens, broilers, and layers as well, and just asking the question, what do you need, and trying to find the middle ground between the two, and of course what some of the things we want to do and some of the things the industry needs don't exactly align, but I think that this sandwich and a turkey burger, whatever you want to call it, right? When you look at that, I think it really encompasses the needs of the industry, the desires of the faculty, not just at the University of Minnesota, but also at local community colleges. And it's really what we're calling a stackable poultry training program. So the idea is that we're going to create a branded program that tries to capture all of this. And it's not one person or one entity that's going to claim this program. It's really a lot of people and multiple institutions and outside of academics, industry partners, right? And so just to kind of summarize where we've seen some of the needs at, I think, I'm coming from the College of Vet Med and interest in poultry health and disease, I'm really interested in the stuff at the top, right? But hearing from the industry and what they really need, there's interest at the top, but there might be even more need at the bottom levels. And so what we've tried to do is talk to different groups. So first two groups obviously were the CVM and CFANs at the university. But then we brought in, as Steve mentioned, Ridgewater and said, well, what could we do to create an environment where a person could come in and take a certificate or a base level training program, and then as they get into a company and work there, they can continue to work their way up the educational ladder without having to go and take a full 2-year or 4-year degree necessarily, without having to go to St. Paul for multiple years. So the idea behind this, and it's still kind of, some parts of it are in its beginning stages, other parts are farther along. I'll talk about that in a second. But the basic idea is that somebody who would want to work their way up this educational ladder and then hopefully work their way up their career ladder would be able to do this without having to go somewhere else to do it. It's particularly talking about central and rural Minnesota. And so what we're trying to do is use Ridgewater as really the base for the ground level training. So when I say ground level, like Steve talked about, workforce development, farm level training skills, and then maybe an AS or an applied associate's degree in a poultry science, or maybe it's simply a certificate. But the beauty of that is that if you can provide that at Ridgewater and then stack onto that with additional training so that maybe your credits from the AAS or whatever that might be called can then be transferred to a bachelor's, you could get your associate's degree and then also pursue a bachelor's degree in poultry science. So that the green there, the lettuce, is really kind of the bachelor's level, so what we call undergraduate, right? And above that would be once you get your bachelor's degree, and this doesn't exclude, this could be veterinarians too, it could be people that simply have a bachelor's in animal science that are at that stage in their career where maybe they've got a degree in animal science and they want to work for a poultry industry, but they've never really had formal poultry education before. This is where the red comes in. And so the red would be the idea that we're going to create a certificate-based course or certificate-based program that would encompass multiple courses. And these would all be available online with the exception of just the last little piece of it. For a week they would come in person to Wilmer and they would have a capstone experience. So they could take that certificate online. That certificate could then be applied towards a professional master's degree. So I'll talk about two certificates here in a second, but if we have a poultry health certificate, and then there's another certificate that's available through the college that's all about leadership and food systems. If you took those two certificates online completely, and you could take them at the same time, or you could take them one after another, so either it would take you 1 year online, so you could do it from your basement in your underwear, right, and get your certificate. You could do that within a year, or you could do it back to back, and then within 2 years you'd have enough credits so that you'd have to take one more online class and you could have a professional master's degree. Then, if you still stick with that poultry health certificate, you could stack those credits onto, so say you're more on the research and development side of things, and you need not only educational training from a course perspective, but you also need a more enhanced research training. In that case, you could take those as your credits that would apply towards your master's degree, and you could get a thesis-based master's in applied poultry science, so that would be the top level. So the difference there is that instead of doing it all online, you would come in and do your research either at McRock and Wilmer, or you would do your research in St. Paul, depending on where you would rather be and what advisor you might align with. And I should say that how is this different from traditional poultry master's programs? I think there's a couple of things. So I've mentioned the location component of it. So I think that making it accessible to the industry will enhance the ability for current employees to pursue their master's degree. But also, what makes it different than the traditional is that what we envision is that we align this with the industry partners. So in the background of developing all these courses, there's going to be a stakeholder advisory committee that consists of key players within the turkey layer and broiler industries. These people are going to help guide our curriculum development. They're also going to help define research questions. So one key difference about this program is that the projects that the students choose to pursue research on will be based on specific questions that the industry will develop. So not only will the industry be able to get students trained so that they have a stronger workforce internally, but they're also going to be hopefully answering relevant and specific research questions that are out there. So that's in a nutshell. Let me just talk a little bit about these two certificates. The one I haven't really talked about yet, so this is that idea of the stackable option where you put the certificates together and you have nearly enough for a master's degree. I know this is difficult to see, but this is, I'm just going to summarize it. This is the Food Safety Leadership Program. And this is a certificate program that's already available at the University of Minnesota, and it's a 13 credit program. And again, it's mainly online, except for at the beginning and the end of this 13-month program, you would come in. And what is this program all about? It's really designed for working professionals with the goal of enhancing their communication skills, number one, enhancing their knowledge of general, broadly, food systems, number two, and then number three, helping them become the future leaders. So we've heard from industry that there's a lot of people in the mid to upper levels that would really benefit from this type of training to become better leaders, better communicators. And there's also pieces of economics and budget in here as well. So I think there's lots of things that could help somebody in any food system related position. So this would be one option as a certificate. And you could take this, again, remember I said you could take them together with this one, or you could take them back to back, and you nearly have a professional master's degree. You would be basically one biostatistics or other elective course away from a professional master's degree. So this is the poultry health certificate option that and this is actually in development right now. We're meeting soon to go through who's going to develop the course content, and the goal is to roll this out next fall, which is a pretty ambitious goal, but I think if we don't get ambitious, we might not ever get anything done. So that's the goal. So of course, who would be involved in this? It would be everybody poultry-related faculty at the university. So this is not a CVM program. This is not a CFANS program. It has to be housed somewhere, so it may end up at one or the other, or it might end up in its own institute. We don't know yet. Depends on what the regents want us to do, basically. But nevertheless, this is the idea behind it, is that you've got a 13 credit certificate online, with the exception of the last one, which would be a capstone. Now, we put capstone in molecular technologies, but this has evolved a bit since I made this. So now it's a capstone in molecular technologies and experiential learning. So we would partner with industry to do some crash course field experience, which is not really going to be easy, but I think there's ways that we could do that. I say that because it's tough to do anything in a week, right? You can only go in certain places at certain times, so that would be difficult. But at the very least, they get in and they get to learn about. At the top, we've got really basics, right? Basics about the bird, learning about the anatomy and physiology of the bird, how to feed the bird, how to identify health, or how to know what health. How do you define health, and then how to identify when health goes awry and disease is coming. And then as you get towards the bottom, you get more technical. So then you get into biosecurity and risk and ways to mitigate that, food safety, and then what I think is really important is understanding technologies, not necessarily being able to do the technologies, but with more and more enhanced diagnostics in the future of this idea of field-based, on-the-spot DNA sequencing and all these other things. I think it's important for these people to have an understanding of what that forensic microbiology looks like, and what does it mean when somebody tells you, I found a sequence of a salmonella in your sample. What does that actually tell us, right? So things like that. So our hopes are that the goal would be that this ends up with a cohort or a class size of approximately 25 to 30 students. We're starting small, though. We're going to start with a pilot next fall of 5 to 10 and try to see how that's going to be our really Abby, whether she knows it or not yet, is going to help with the assessment of that program and figuring out what's working and what's not, and what's feasible and what's not. And once we get that down, then hopefully we can roll out with larger class sizes after that. So just to finish, I think that this is your pathway to your master's degree. I've talked about this already, but I think that this idea of a sandwich approach really, in a branded program with a face to it, is really going to drive its success. And then along with Steve and the MTGA and all of our partners, coming up with ways to keep this sustainable. I wanted to leave a little time. Hopefully I left at least a few minutes for any types of questions you might have or suggestions, things that you see as a need or something that's not here that you think we should consider. So I'll open it up to any comments or questions at this point. Thank you.
What's it cost?
Oh, that's a good question. So the question was, what does it cost, right? And so that's an important piece of this, because the one thing we've realized is that if we charge full tuition that the university tells us to charge for anything postgraduate, which would include that certificate option, you're talking, if you're out of state, it's, I think if you're in state, it's maybe $1,500 to $1,600 per credit. If you're out of state, it's almost double that. We're not going to do that. So what they will allow you to do is to, if you go out and do a market analysis of what's out there and what your competitors are, and find a price range that will be sustainable and will also not make it so that nobody would ever pay for that, then that's what we're going to aim for. So what I've seen, I haven't done a complete market analysis, but I've certainly looked at all of the other programs that are out there, including these types of online certificate courses. And what I've seen for post-baccalaureate, it ranges anywhere, well, let's just say certificate courses in poultry in general will range anywhere from a few $100s per credit up to $1,000 or more per credit. Our goal is to be on the lower end of that so that we're sustainable. So I guess if you said, let's just throw out 500 per credit. If we went with something like that, over 13 credits, right, you're looking at about, what, 6,500, 6,500? Did I do the math right? Yeah. Who's the math people in the crowd? Yeah. So
12 to 15,000 to get a master's if you have a bachelor's.
Yep. Just compare that to the, I mean, if you compare that to what it would actually cost to get a master's in person, that's like a fourth or less of what it would cost. So that would be on the more expensive end. Now, when we get down to the bottom ends, the workforce training and associate's degree, I'm not going to speak for Ridgewater, but it will be very affordable. In fact, their online curriculum is some of it is considerably less expensive than their in-person curriculum. So I think they have ways of doing the same thing and coming up with what the sweet spot is in terms of being affordable, but yet they've got to obviously pay the people that teach the courses. So thanks for that question, though.
You can compare it all to Texas A&M's program.
Yep.
Or to the University of Georgia.
Yep. So the question was, did we compare to Texas A&M's programs, University of Georgia and C-State? Yes, University of Arkansas, we've compared to all of those. And I will say that, well, it depends on which place we're talking about. They've all got different and unique programs. This one is quite distinct from any of those, number one. Number two, I've seen the costs of all those, and this would be right in that ballpark. So.
What are your goals for enrollment?
Goals for enrollment overall, or just related?
In terms of quantity of students each year.
Yeah, so goals for enrollment, so there's different tiers, right? And I'm not quite sure at the bottom level. I will say that from what I've heard from industry, they've told us, they being you, have told us that they've got enough people to fill up large classes every single year. So I would envision that at the bottom level with the skills training and associate's degree, you would have fairly large cohorts of students. And when I say that, I mean maybe in the 50 number, right? As you go up, that number goes down. So for the certificate at the postgraduate level, that's the one I was talking about where our target is 25 or 30. When we get into the masters, it's going to be substantially smaller. So what I'd like, in my mind, a successful poultry master's program would have about 10 people per year coming in, maybe 5 professional masters, 5 thesis masters, a variety of different advisors, so that at any given time we've got between 20 and 30 different people. And I think an important part of this is to create a community too. The one thing we've done in the past that I think has not succeeded is to create a silo effect where each PI takes that person and they're part of a program at the university, but they hardly ever see each other. What we really want to do here is create this community, hopefully in Wilmer, where there's a community of all people, all seeking professional degrees in poultry that are doing it together, that are learning together. That also enables us to do more of the experiential learning out here at the same time. So our goal would be to do it in that fashion. So I guess, are you thinking regionally or nationally or?
I guess in the state or within the states around us?
Yeah, that's a fair question, and I think it depends on what you define as industry, right? So if you're talking turkey industry needs, that's one level, and again, it's tiered, right? So at the bottom, I feel like there's very strong need for training at that level, and how do you define strong need? I mean, that's where we're going to have to figure out exactly what. But that number of 40 to 50, I don't think is unreasonable. But that's not just turkey, because turkey won't sustain that alone. But when you put in all the other industries, it should. And when you create national versus local options, then I think that'll recruit more students.
Is there one more question over this area?
Abby had her hand up.
I just was wondering, assuming the pilot will be successful, is it going to be a competitive application process? Or will some of the stakeholder groups who are heavily involved and supportive, will they get to say, we want this employee to go through? Or how will that selection process occur?
So another great question, what will the requirements be? Will there be some cases where an existing employee, they just want to put them through the program? I think there's going to have to be, for university purposes at both Ridgewater and U of M, there has to be a minimal set of requirements, and that can be as low as a high school diploma or a G equivalent. So that would probably be the minimal requirements, is something like that. And then as you go up, there'd be, as a post-baccalaureate degree, you'd have to have a bachelor's degree to be able to take that. But I don't foresee there being really extreme, if this program is really popular and competitive, we may have to raise the requirements. But at this point, we're thinking, minimal basic requirements to get into the program.
I think you can get in, Abby. So. All right. Thanks, Tim. So just one other thing I want to mention on the associate's degree. We have pulled together a committee of HR people from some of the poultry companies as well as some representatives of farms. And so if you're interested in participating in that discussion, it's not a heavy time commitment. But we did pull it together because Ridgewater was saying, what kind of skills do you need on the farm? And so that's the purpose of that group. And if you're interested in the Integrated Food Systems Leadership Program, we do have brochures out at registration. And something else that we've heard from growers is that the healthcare is a challenge, and that's no surprise. So what we have done over the last several months is investigated an association health plan and reached out to a broker. Well, we talked to several brokers and then kind of settled on one that to help us go through this process. And so we have some information out through surveys. Well, so I'm going to back up a half a step. So this is something that, as we thought about in Minnesota, that also applies to other states. And so we approached the Midwest Poultry Federation, and that is owned by the Turkey Council and the Chicken and Egg Association and state poultry associations in other states. And approached them and said, hey, there's a need for us. I'm assuming it's a need for everybody. So we're actually running this as a Midwest Poultry multi-state process or program. And so surveys were sent out through the state poultry associations asking members if they were interested in possibly participating in a healthcare plan, a health insurance plan, and if they're interested at all, to fill out the information, because ultimately we need to have a pool of people that we would take that the broker would take to the insurance providers to get quotes from them. And to date, we have roughly 20 from Minnesota turkey. We've got about, I think, 11,000 in the pool altogether, and but we've got about 20 farms from Minnesota, and I don't know how many people that represents because I didn't go back and check that. But I know that we have a lot more than 20 farms out there, and this is open to allied industry as well. So if you're a member of MTGA, or SEAM, you qualify for this. And to explain a little bit more, we've asked James Claremont. James is the broker that we're working with Brown & Brown. And James will be here for a while yet today, and I think back tomorrow. But I've asked James to come up and just say a few words about what the association health plan is, and again, for you guys to be better informed, but also to help encourage others to check the survey out.
Just by a show of hands, how many people in the room think health insurance is expensive? Okay. And how many people think it's kind of painful to buy it? Meaning the process of looking at options, complex, takes time, figuring out what's right for your employees if you have it, have them having to do that every year. How many people enjoy that process? Nobody? How many people have read something in the newspaper in the last 30 days relating to health insurance? Anybody see just in the last 2 days, fearless leader in Washington is proposing that they have more transparency for the cost of hospital care and things of that nature. That's sort of on the back of a more recent proposal that discussed making pharmaceutical manufacturers display the cost of their drugs on the commercials that we all see. People hear about that? It's in the news, right? It's a big problem nationwide, and it's a big problem for the people in this room. So about 7 or 8 months ago, I had an opportunity to meet with Steve and Deanna and just talk about what might be possible from a standpoint of taking all of you and putting you into a larger group, and how that might look, and what the potential benefits would be of structuring the program that way, and what some of the pitfalls would be. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and run through some information on who I am, why I'm here, what an association health plan is, why it makes sense, some success that we've had with AHP plans in the past and plans that we currently operate, and then talk a little bit about next steps. So Brown & Brown is the 5th largest insurance broker in the nation. I've been a part of Brown & Brown since August of 2017. Prior to that, I had my own firm in the Twin Cities called Claremont Financial Group. We were around for 15 years. Prior to that, I worked for a different regional agency. So I've been doing this for about 25 years and probably worked on 10,000 health insurance plan renewals. I've done self-funding, worked with unions, worked with all different verticals, different sizes of groups. And Brown & Brown acquired me, as I said, back in August of 2017. One of the reasons we called ourselves Claremont Financial Group instead of Claremont Insurance Group is because I found out early on that the moment you say the word insurance, people hang up. Brown & Brown also owns a number of other agencies throughout the country, so we fly under a number of different flags. We have some big accounts that you probably heard of, and some smaller accounts throughout the Twin Cities, many of these that I work on that you've also probably heard of. We write over $7 billion in insurance premium in the marketplace with major carriers. You probably recognize all the names on the screen. Why does that matter? It gives us some clout. It gives us the ability to get to the highest level of underwriter, actuary, all that sort of thing. We'll have a team of people that already have been involved in trying to put this together for you with all sorts of industry experience and association plan experience. So enough about us. Let's talk about what we want to talk about. What is an association health plan? It's taking a group of organizations, employers, and combining them into a larger plan. The plan can either be self-insured or fully insured. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on what that is, but certainly I'm happy to after the fact if people would like. One of the reasons that AHP's association health plans have kind of become popular again is that, again, President Trump allowed for a different kind of association plan to be made available that was not as restrictive. So association health plans have been around for 100 years. There's I think 87 of them operating in the state of Minnesota right now. But in the past, you had to have a commonality of industry and geography in order to set it up. The new approach allows greater flexibility. That being said, you all will qualify for what we call the Pathway 1, and forgive me for the size of that font. Pathway 1 is the type of association plan that's been around forever, and it involves organizations that are in the same industry and are in an association for a reason other than simply to buy insurance. So you guys have all sorts of education initiatives, lots of different things that you do together. Insurance is just a bolt-on. The reason that's important is the Pathway 1 allows us greater flexibility in designing the plan, the program, how it can work, all that kind of thing. Incidentally, I wanted to thank the fellow who was just up here. That was a great presentation. I have a son who's in a master's program, and it's a lot more than $15,000, I found out. That's a good deal. What are the advantages of purchasing through an association group versus on your own? Well, the big one is greater economies of scale, right? So we all know that the law of large numbers has an impact on purchasing insurance, and the larger the risk pool, the better off that you're going to be. The other thing that happens when you have that larger risk pool and larger plan is that you now have the ability to access carriers that maybe you didn't have access to if you only had 20 people on your own. Maybe now you can offer, or the association can offer, 10 different coverage designs or 20 different coverage designs that each of your employees can choose from. Maybe now we can offer Health Partners and Blue Cross and Preferred One and United Health Group all in the same package. And so you're really going to be moving into a negotiation position in the marketplace where you have much greater flexibility, much greater clout, and open up probably very different opportunities for yourselves. Talking a little bit about administrative advantages on the right-hand side of the column, I've been a small business owner. We had 12 employees, and I know what it feels like to be the visionary and the CEO and the janitor and the IT and the school nurse and every other thing all at the same time, and it's very difficult. So when the association is able to put together a plan like this, you now can essentially get out of the business of providing health insurance and employee benefits for your employees. So things like open enrollment process, flex plan administration, health savings account administration, COBRA administration, HIPAA administration, ACA compliance. All of these things get taken off of your plate and put onto our plate, which will leave you more time to do the things that you do best, that generate revenue for your organization, build your farm, et cetera, et cetera. Talking a little bit about the various structures that are built into designing a health plan. And again, I don't want to go too far into the weeds and talk and spend too much time, but basically the primary components in any health insurance program are administrative function, okay? So we got to get people enrolled onto the plan. We have to communicate how the benefit program works. They have to get their ID cards. There has to be, doesn't have to be, but there's generally a preferred provider organization set up. All of those things need to happen. Then people actually do go to the doctor, right? How many people in the room know somebody who's had a knee replaced in the last 5 years? By show of hands. How about a hip? Shoulder? Anybody know anybody in friend, family circle that, God forbid, has had cancer? I do. How about a problem pregnancy or a preemie? Anyone? Okay. So the very largest cost of funding a health insurance program is actually paying the claims. It's when your employees and the plan participants go to the doctor has to get paid, right? So on the front end of the plan, we have the admin piece, okay? Put it all together, communicate it, enroll people. Now they go, now we got to pay for that, claims cost. And then we also create generally, in most plans, a reinsurance component that minimizes our risk. And what that does is, if you have an employee that needs to go down to the Mayo Clinic and get an autologous bone marrow transplant, which costs roughly $400,000, that we buy insurance that says any claim over $200,000 gets reinsured, so we don't have to pay the whole $400,000 out of our plan. Anybody know what neonatal intensive care costs these days for the preemie baby? $20,000 a day. Okay, so if you multiply that by 50 days, there's your $1 million baby. So we cede off some of that risk to preserve the financial health of the plan. And then, of course, we have to set up a process for billing each member who's part of the association plan. Employees make contributions via payroll deduction. You then would be billed by us. Does that make sense for everyone? Any questions on anything so far? Okay. So what do? We put it all together for you. We go and gather the data around who might be interested in participating. So we did send out electronically a real easy two-minute questionnaire. Name of your organization, how many eligible employees, approximately how many dependents, and would you be interested in looking at this? No obligation, not committing to anything. Got copies of that survey on paper out at the table here that I'll be sitting there, as well as this presentation, or I could email it to you. But so our first role in our first step in getting this done is just kind of getting our arms around what are we looking at from a standpoint of how many employee and dependent lives, because that'll influence which carriers we want to talk to, how many different types of options will be made available, all that kind of thing. So it's critical, and I realize that, you know, we all get a lot of emails and things like that, and we kind of put them aside and whatever, but if you do have an interest in this, and it sounds like something that might benefit you, I would sincerely ask you to complete that survey so that we can get that information gathered up. As Steve mentioned, just on the small number of replies that we've already received, we're talking about a base covering over 11,000 individuals, and I think we're just scratching the surface. So I think there's a real good possibility that we're going to have something here, and this is going to be a real thing. But again, the first step is we just need to kind of know what are we dealing with from a standpoint of pure numbers. It was interesting when I started talking to Steve and Deanna that, I mean, obviously they know how many employers and you know, organizations are members of the association, but not necessarily how many employees any of them had. So one of my first questions was, how many employees are we talking about? The answer is we don't know. So we need to get that going. Once that happens and we have an idea of how many people we're talking to, we will go through the various states that are involved and weed through the regulatory requirements, and they're different for each state. We'll then make a decision as to whether, and it won't be our decision, it'll be your decision, an association decision. Do we want one single plan that all of the different 14 state associations would feed into, or will we do 14 separate state associations, or will we combine some and not others because they have similar regulatory environments, that sort of thing? Once that happens, we will then interview United Health Group, Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and any other potentially interested party and ask them to give us pricing. We'll probably ask that some sort of a steering committee made up of your membership be involved with us on that and meet with those carriers and talk about what success will look like for the program. Once that happens, they will provide pricing for us without any type of claims data, health histories on members, anything like that. They have enough empirical, analytical, actuarial data to know that insuring this particular vertical costs this much in comparison to the average or the community rate, so on and so forth. And then we'll come back and say, this is what we have available and this is what it costs, and would you like to participate, and how does that compare to what you have currently, and things of that nature. Probably the kickoff is going to be 2021. We initially were trying to roll something out by 2020, but you know, it's almost the 4th of July. By the way, did anybody notice how high the corn was driving up here today? Not very, right? Kind of a late season for planting. These are some examples of organizations that we work with right now to provide association health plans. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the bell curve that influences how premiums are calculated because we talked a little bit about that already. But to kind of summarize everything that's on that page right there, the one thing that I will share with you that I think is important to take away is that just having a bigger group doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have better rates. Ultimately, in health insurance, the overall health of the group is what will influence what the rate is. And I'll give you an example that I use frequently. Take a group of 10 people that are really, really, really healthy. Anybody got an example they can think of? Help me, people. Come on. Group of 10. I'm thinking the Olympic swim team. Michael Phelps, all these guys running around with their shirts off, right? They're pretty healthy. They'd be real inexpensive to insure because they don't get sick. Now let's take a giant group, like say the group the size of China. Let's assume everybody in China had cancer. The per person cost to insuring China with everybody having cancer would be a whole lot more than the per person cost for the swim team. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the overall health of the group is really what's going to drive the rates. Now, the good news is that historically and actuarially, your industry is better than average. So if right now you're lumped into the average and you're paying a community rate, once we get you out on your own, there's a possibility that we could save 15 to 20% on the premiums. And, you know, at the risk of overpromise and underdeliver, and we don't even know how many people we have yet, so that's probably a bold statement for me to make, but that would be the goal. And then, of course, when we deliver it, if we deliver it, you'll be able to, you know, take a look at what you have currently and, you know, evaluate it like you would anything else. And then just sort of the process that would take place once we do have a plan, so on and so forth. I think that kind of gives you the feel. Again, any questions I can possibly answer? Nothing? All right. I will be out there for the afternoon. I'm going to come to the turkey tasting event. Can't think of anything better to do than have a cold beer on a day like today, and hopefully I will see you then. Thank you.